I was enjoying what looked like a stable and enviable suburban life, until the moment my own daughter casually exposed my husband's affair at the children's play park, right in the middle of breakfast, with a bowl of cereal in her hands. And clearly, I was the last to know that my marriage was falling apart. I stared into the bathroom mirror, patting concealer over the dark circles under my eyes, the result of a sleepless night spent analyzing cash flow for a client. I'm Evelyn Hart, a personal finance advisor for the ultra-wealthy in Connecticut. Even while feeding my daughter, my eyes stayed glued to my laptop screen, temporarily parked on the kitchen table, monitoring a $200 million investment fund's liquidity. "Mommy, I want Cheerios," said Isabel, my 6-year-old, pulling me back to the present. Just another Tuesday morning in our colonial-style home in Oakville. I had no idea that 1 second later, in the middle of the soft clinking of a spoon in a bowl of milk, she would calmly detonate the life I thought was rock solid. "Daddy hugged a lady in gym clothes at the park," Isabel said, milk dripping down her chin. I forced a professional smile, the same one I used when billionaire clients asked if buying a superyacht for their mistress was tax deductible. "What did she look like?" I asked, light as air. Isabel replied, "She wore round glasses and had a flower on her hand." "A flower?" My heart clenched. A flower tattoo, exactly like the one I'd seen on Sienna Voss's wrist, Robert's rival investment advisor during the $200 million Wexford Tech IPO deal. I slowly set my coffee cup down, careful not to let anyone see my trembling fingers. "When was that?" I asked, cutting Isabel's sandwich into two perfect halves, as if everything was still normal. "Sunday," she shrugged. "When you were busy, Daddy said he'd take me to the play park." Isabel added solemnly, "Daddy said don't tell Mommy because it's grown-up stuff, and it would make Mommy sad." 8 years of marriage, one sweet, beautiful child, and those framed photos from vacations, and perfect Christmases lining the hallway that made the neighbors jealous. All of it was just backdrop to one humiliating truth. My husband was involved with the woman he always called his professional rival. "Did she look like anyone you've seen before?" I asked, my financial brain already logging every detail. "She looked like the lady from Dad's year-end party," Isabel said. "The one Daddy talked to forever at the wine bar." My throat went dry. Sienna Voss. The woman rumored to manipulate stock prices, recently hired by a fund that was now directly competing with Robert's firm. Isabel innocently stirred her milk and added, "She has a flower on her hand, like Auntie Ava." I nodded slightly. That tattoo, I remembered at the company party, Sienna had subtly covered her wrist when my daughter complimented the flower. A cold sensation ran down my spine. But I kept my composure down to the last detail. Clearing the bowls, brushing my daughter's hair, sending her off to the school bus. Then I sent Robert a sweet text. "Good luck with the big deal, love." That big deal he was handling might have had more layers than I thought. I didn't confront him. Not right away. Only amateurs do that. I did what any woman who understands the financial game would do. Gather data. I called my assistant Dana, canceled all my morning meetings with the excuse of urgent family matters. Technically, not a lie. Discovering that your husband may be involved in both an affair and insider trading more than qualifies as a family emergency. By 10 a.m., I had a plan. Not some emotional outburst, not torching the house, not hurling his clothes into the yard like in some TV drama. No, for me, retaliation, just like any high-stakes investment, required precision, timing, and evidence. Saturday morning, Robert casually said over breakfast, "I'm thinking of taking Izzy out today. Give you some rest." So thoughtful. A-model dad, using his own daughter as an alibi. "That sounds lovely." I smiled and kissed his cheek. "I'll rest." 20 minutes after they left, I parked 3 blocks from the park, wearing a Yankees cap and oversized sunglasses, rule number 7 in crisis management. Verification requires tangible proof. A child's account, while believable, isn't enough in cases of divorce or financial misconduct. I sat on a wooden bench with a direct line of sight to the playground and the big oak tree Isabel called the place where Daddy hugged that lady. I didn't have to wait long as my daughter merged into the crowd of kids climbing the slide. Robert glanced at his phone, then headed toward the oak tree. 5 minutes later, Sienna appeared. Black gym clothes, round glasses, rose tattoo on her left wrist. I raised my phone, zoomed in. Through the lens, I saw him lean in, his hand too low on her back, her fingers slipping into his hair. When they kissed, after making sure no kids were watching, I hit the shutter repeatedly, every frame crystal clear, every pixel of betrayal captured. Robert suddenly looked up, as if sensing he was being watched. I ducked, retying my shoelace, the lens trembling ever so slightly. Enough to throw my heart off beat, but not the moment part of me went numb. 8 years of marriage collapsed into a few secretive minutes behind a tree, while our daughter played not 20 meters away. But another part of me, the one used to crisis, to numbers and strategy, kicked in. I didn't shatter, didn't cry, didn't rush in asking stupid questions like, "Why are you cheating on me?" I calculated, I observed. And in my mind, I'd already begun planning the most precise counterattack of my life. Sunday dinner was quieter than usual, but for me, it was the perfect time to launch phase 2. It was no longer a family dinner like before. It was a chessboard I had already set, while Robert was busy talking on the phone with a partner at the office. The classic excuse in every affair. I opened the evidence folder on my iPad and started a video call with Laura Kingsley, the woman who once ruled Wall Street and the only person I trusted to see the entire picture. Laura listened as I summarized, eyes narrowing behind silver frames. She examined each photo of Robert and Sienna, every line of metadata I'd carefully annotated. Her expression shifted from confusion to shock, then to that controlled fury only Wall Street legends develop after decades of dealing with greedy sharks. "That's Sienna Voss," she said, placing a hand on her chest. "Rival advisor in the Wexford Tech IPO deal." Her voice lowered. "Sienna Voss was once investigated for money laundering in Boston. She's not stupid, but Robert is. Don't get angry, Evelyn. People who think they can control greed always trap themselves." I said nothing, just nodded. Laura continued. "Now listen carefully. You don't need to expose them. You need to let them expose themselves. We don't fight with emotion, we fight with procedure. And remember, until we have everything, Robert needs to believe you still love him." That entire night, I sat in my office, laptop light casting my face like the ID photo of someone about to be reborn. I restored all of Robert's emails from backups, using the hidden keylogger software Laura sent. It bypassed two-factor authentication. By 3 a.m., I had what I needed: a forged contract bearing the CEO of Westbrook's signature, stating that 3% of the equity would be temporarily transferred to an offshore Cayman account under the name of Voss Capital, Sienna's shell company. I sent the file to Laura. Her reply came almost immediately. "That's enough. Don't add anything more. Stay calm. Begin the next step tomorrow morning." I stared at that message for a long time, then closed the laptop. In my mind, everything started to align: emotions, evidence, motives, and a plan cold as ice. Tuesday morning, the kitchen smelled faintly of freshly brewed coffee and golden waffle batter. I placed the plate on the table and poured coffee into the white mug labeled "World's Greatest Dad," last year's birthday gift from our daughter. "I took the job in Switzerland," I said calmly, "planning to bring our daughter by year's end." Robert looked up, a faint smile of relief forming, the smile of someone who just spotted a safe exit. "Really? I'm happy for you," he said, his voice cracking with joy. Until I added, "Isabel and I will settle there." His fork froze mid-air. The waffle was about to break apart, just like his perfect life. The waffle wasn't the only thing shattered that Tuesday morning. Robert's expression shifted faster than a fortune wheel, confused, relieved, then horrified as he realized something. "Isabel, settle," he stammered, lowering the fork with a trembling hand. But my fund is here. My job, all my relationships? I asked innocently, pushing the strawberry jam jar across the table. Your relationship, is it a very close one? Our eyes met, and in that moment, I could see the gears of his Harvard-trained brain spinning, calculating risks, assessing probabilities, and finally landing on the terrifying question, what do you know? He finally spoke, slipping into his leadership voice, the one reserved for difficult clients. Rational, authoritative, completely devoid of real emotion. We need to talk about custody. Already in progress, I replied. Miles Cohen is drafting the divorce papers, I said, my tone steady, like discussing business. Robert choked on his coffee, spraying it onto his crisp white shirt. Miles Cohen, one of the few attorneys who rarely loses. You hired Miles? He asked, voice pitched high. I shrugged, my smile almost blank. Oh, Miles owed me a favor. Today, he's repaying it. Robert stared at me, his eyes no longer those of a husband, but of a businessman calculating losses. What do you want, Evelyn? I replied simply. I want fairness. I'll take 70% of the assets and full custody. Then I stood up, clearing the dishes, as if that entire conversation was just part of my morning routine. Robert's face turned from red to white, then to the same gray as the wall behind him. I could see real fear, not from love, but from calculation. He realized this wasn't about jealousy anymore. It was about federal crimes. I picked up a napkin, wiped the coffee drip from the table, and said softly, You have until noon to decide. A peaceful divorce, or you lose much more. The blood drained from Robert's face so quickly. I briefly wondered if he might faint. What are you implying? He whispered, glancing toward the stairs to see if our daughter was witnessing her father's professional death in real time. I'm not implying anything, I shrugged, though our daughter did make some interesting observations about your Sunday activities. Kids notice everything, don't they? Especially your special friend with the tattoo hiding behind a tree. He panicked, scrambling to explain. Honey, I can explain. Save it for the SEC hearing. I cut in, glancing at the clock. Isabel was due for school in 3 minutes. I whispered to myself beneath the sound of running water. You once told me that in the market, whoever has the information wins. Thank you for that lesson. The next 48 hours unfolded like a psychological thriller, with me directing every twist. Robert quietly moved into the guest room without being told, a silent confession hanging in the air like luxury wallpaper at a crime scene. I maintained a perfectly normal front for our daughter, helping with homework and nodding politely when Robert used the same old excuse about working late at the fund. That fund, according to Aunt Ava's intel network of blockchain experts with uncanny reach, had a visitor named Sienna Voss spotted at 9 p.m. and leaving at midnight. Friday night, the kitchen was lit only by warm yellow light and the soft clink of glasses. Ava sat across from me, her leather jacket lazily draped over the chair. So, what are you actually planning to do? She asked, swirling her glass of red wine. I looked into the dark liquid, rich as blood, then answered slowly. I don't just plan to get back what's mine. I plan to burn it all. Maximize alimony, strip the house, his retirement funds. I turned the Cabernet glass in my hand, thinking. I was thinking bigger than just taking half his assets and his pride. Ava raised an eyebrow, the tattoo on her arm dancing with anticipation. I'm thinking about the CFO seat he's been chasing for 3 years, I explained. The one nearly guaranteed if he pulls off the Westbrook IPO. The seat that would double his income and finally give him a corner office with a golf course view. The seat he was willing to sleep with a rival advisor to secure, Ava said dryly. Exactly, I nodded. And what happens to that seat when the board finds out their rising star is negotiating trading strategy in bed? Ava's eyes widened. You wouldn't. I wouldn't, I agreed, pouring her another glass. But Laura might. He thinks I'm just the wife who knows how to stay quiet. but I'm the one who understands the flow of his money better than any of them. Ava chuckled, voice husky like the night wind. If he's playing chess in the boardroom, you're playing in the global data system. I took a sip, quietly opened my laptop, the screen casting a bluish glow on my tired face. $12.4 million total, I said. Ava exhaled, leaned back, laughed softly. So from one affair, you've landed in federal insider trading territory. You really do know how to pick them. I smiled, thin as a blade. I didn't pick. I just audited what was already mine. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat under the computer light, listening to the steady drizzle outside the window. In the middle of all those cold numbers, I saw Robert's face, the man who once held my hand on our wedding day, now hiding behind wire transfers and mouse clicks. What I felt wasn't anger anymore. It was something far quieter, quiet like the moment before a storm hits. The next night, dinner looked like any other. White tablecloth, scented candles, our daughter cheerfully chatting about saying goodbye to her classmates. But the air between me and Robert was thick, like the room itself knew something was about to explode. The lady in gym clothes said Daddy told her work secrets, Isabel said. Scooping mashed potatoes, Robert's fork clattered loudly against the plate. He stammered, "You must have heard that wrong?" "She has a picture on her hand," Isabel clarified helpfully. "The one Daddy kissed in the park." The amazing thing about children, besides their innocence and joy, is their total inability to keep family secrets. Maybe it was just Daddy's friend. She's probably just a coworker. I chimed in smoothly, because even though we were divorcing, I didn't want my daughter's childhood tainted. We had agreed. Every question would be answered with just enough truth, never blackening the other. Grown-ups sometimes have complicated friendships. She's just an advisor, sometimes helps Daddy analyze data. Then why did you take pictures of Daddy? Isabel asked, raising her milk for a sip. Silence. Robert cornered me in the kitchen after Isabel went upstairs. He had talked to Sienna, he began, trying to sound firm, though his eyes betrayed fear. We agreed to end it. The way he said "we," pushing me back into the position of outsider. I want to fix the marriage. Classic. Step 1 of the cheater's playbook. Minimize, end it, reconcile. That's good, I replied, scrolling emails on my phone with theatrical indifference. Before or after Grant Pierce was appointed lead on the IPO? He inhaled sharply. Confirmation I'd struck again. He nearly collapsed into the chair, sweat soaking his collar. I stood, placed a hand on his shoulder, and said quietly, "Laura invited us to brunch Sunday. You should go, and remember to bring the signed divorce papers." He looked up, eyes bloodshot. "Evelyn, don't. I can explain." I cut him off. "No need explanations, only matter in court. Here, I only care about the signature." When he went silent, I turned and walked away. The hallway light cast my shadow long across the floor, cold and straight like a boundary line. Saturday night, the bedroom was soaked in dim yellow light and the faint scent of cheap cologne. Robert's attempt to mask the smell of fear. He stood leaning against the wardrobe, voice trembling. "Evelyn! I'll transfer $10 million into your account. Let's stop the divorce. I won't see Sienna again, I swear." I looked at him, eyes cold as glass. "You think I asked for a divorce because of money?" Robert stepped closer, desperate. "What do you want? The house? The fund? I'll disappear if you want. Just forgive me. It was only one mistake." I tilted my head slightly, voice calm. "Let's go to the party together tomorrow." After he left the room, I quietly opened my phone. The signal from the wiretap device linked to the landline in the living room had just lit up. Since Thursday night, I had installed that device on the house line, a habit from an old profession, like locking the door before bed, just as I expected. Robert immediately called Grant Pierce, his voice urgent. "She knows everything, Grant. She has photos, the transactions. What do we do?" On the other end, Grant's voice was husky, chillingly calm. "Say nothing. Just get through the acquisition phase, then everything will be in our hands. After that, she'll have no voice left." I stared at the screen as it recorded, my palms slick with sweat, The next morning, I sent the audio file to Ava with one line: "Prepare evidence for the SEC. No trace." Ava replied with a single flame emoji. By noon, I happened to appear at Oakville Country Club, the usual weekend hangout of the Wexford Tech Board. I wore a navy blue dress, carried a latte, and, accidentally, ran into Miles Cohen, who owed me a major favor, and let him speak just loud enough on the club's front porch. "Evelyn, I just looked over the $200 million IPO file. Heard there's insider trading tied to Westbrook. You sure know how to poke the beehive." His voice rang out just enough for the nearby table, where two Westbrook board members were seated, to glance over a tiny seed, dropped in the right soil, spreads faster than any virus. That afternoon, Robert flooded me with messages. "What are you doing? Emergency meeting tomorrow, they're suspicious." I didn't reply. I only saved the last one. "If everything falls apart, I won't let you walk away." I reread that line several times, as if to memorize the tone of despair from a man who once thought he was untouchable Sunday. The brunch at Laura Kingsley's villa in Zurich Hill unfolded with a suffocating kind of elegance. Laura, 60 years old, silver waves in her hair, wrapped in a cream cardigan, slowly poured champagne and asked, "Robert, I heard you worked very closely with Sienna Voss on the Wexford Tech deal." The question floated out, as light as smoke, but everyone knew it carried the weight of interrogation. Robert forced a smile, gripping his glass so tight his knuckles whitened. "Yes, just technical collaboration. Nothing serious." Laura tilted her head, smiling. "I hope so. I don't care for people who confuse finance and feelings." Just then, my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number, just a few words. "Need to meet not his lover. Grant Pierce pressured me. Signed, Sienna Voss." I stared at the screen for a few seconds, then looked up and caught Laura's gaze. She gave the slightest nod, as if she'd already anticipated what came next. The champagne glass in my hand tilted slightly, the light reflecting off the tabletop into a thin streak like a blade. I set the phone down and said calmly, "Excuse me, I need to step outside for a few minutes." I stepped into the backyard, where the late afternoon sun filtered through the olive trees Laura had planted back when she ran Vale. Capital Sienna was already there, visibly tense, her white coat fluttering slightly in the breeze, eyes darting around as if afraid someone was following her. As I approached, she spoke quickly, her voice shaking. "I'm not your husband's lover, Evelyn. I'm just the messenger." I said nothing, only looked straight at her, waiting. She swallowed hard, then lowered her voice. "Grant is shorting 40 million shares of Wexford Tech through a hidden fund. He's using Robert as a pawn. Everything, from having me get close, seduce your husband, to leaking documents, was part of a plan to crash the stock price and buy it out before the IPO." Sienna pulled out her phone, her hands trembling so much she almost dropped it. "I kept a copy," she whispered. "Grant's emails. He ordered me to get close to Tile so I could fabricate false evidence in case the plan collapsed." She transferred the file to my device, then looked up, eyes filled with guilt. "I was wrong for staying silent this long, but I don't want to go down with them." I looked at her and said softly, "You just did the most right thing in your entire career." Sienna pressed her lips together, tears falling, and I simply nodded, saved the file, and turned back toward the house. In the dining room, everyone still sat around the brunch table as if time hadn't passed. The clink of silverware, the fizz of champagne bubbles, unchanged. I walked straight to Laura and asked for a private room. And for Tile to join us, I placed my phone on the oak table. "Laura," I said slowly, "Grant Pierce just shorted 40 million shares of Wexford Tech. Directive emails sent from a private server. Metadata confirms 9:47 p.m. Thursday night." The room went so quiet we could hear the wind brushing past the curtains. Laura looked up, her silver eyes cold as metal. "Are you certain?" I needed only one sentence. "Absolutely." Robert still hadn't understood. He looked at me, confused, then at Laura, then back at me again. "Evelyn, What's happening? I looked at him, smiled faintly, but there was no warmth in my eyes. No, Robert, I replied, voice low and deliberate. This is a federal financial crime. He stood abruptly, his chair crashing behind him, hands trembling as they touched his forehead. Laura remained seated, silently scanning the documents. I've contacted the SEC, I continued. They're willing to listen, but they want someone inside to talk. You have 48 hours. Confess, cooperate, and maybe protect your daughter. Or get ready to watch everything fall apart. Robert stumbled back, eyes wide as if he were staring into an abyss. Evelyn, you promised. You're destroying me, he said, voice cracking. I shook my head slightly. No, you already did that. I'm just trying to save the father of my child. I retrieved my phone, stood up, and said to Laura, The rest belongs to the law now. She only nodded, saying nothing, her eyes full of both respect and gravity. Then I powered off the device, behind me. I heard Robert calling out, desperate, panicked. But I didn't turn around. Because some beginnings, some choices, they have to make on their own. That night, Robert carried his suitcase to Laura's guest house, a small glass cottage at the edge of the Olive Garden, where yellow light flickered against the stone wall. Filled with the scent of pine wood and the metallic undertone of fear, he stood at the doorway, looking at me like he was waiting for a sentence to be handed down. I simply pointed at the wooden desk, already prepped with a laptop and power outlet. Let's begin. Laura entered, silver hair tied back, a fountain pen clipped to the edge of her notebook, like she was stamping the start of a crisis meeting. The plan is to gather precise evidence on Grant, she said, her voice both low and crisp. No emotion, just procedure. Robert opened the laptop, placed his fingers on the keyboard. I handed him a USB key. Install this keylogger on Grant's laptop quietly, no trace. We need access logs, metadata, keystroke patterns. His own hands will sign his guilt. Sienna arrived next, still in her white coat, dark circles under her eyes from lack of sleep, but her voice steadier now. I have access to the Bloomberg terminal at the office. I'll back up all short orders, from the hidden fund to the fragmented child orders across time intervals, full-time and sales, fix logs too. I nodded. Export the full audit trail. Sienna shut the door, sat down, pulled out her laptop. The tap of the enter key sounded like early rain hitting taut canvas. Laura flipped open her notebook, jotted a few lines, then closed it and looked at each of us. Remember, revenge is an investment. She paused, her silver eyes calm like a lake before a storm. We don't get loud. We get the timing right. That night, the guest house echoed only with the fan and the soft clicking of mice. The next morning, Robert's hands trembled as he plugged the USB into Grant's office machine. His reflection in the black screen looked like someone else. Smaller, weaker, more honest, Sienna flooded the drive with trade blotters, order book snapshots, position reports. Ava dropped transaction IDs like tiny glowing breadcrumbs. I gathered everything into an external drive, labeled WBT/Grant, Master Evidence. As I finished labeling, I noticed a thin line of adhesive sticking to my fingers. The tacky feel on my skin snapped me into awareness. Truth clings, and once touched, can't be rinsed off. Monday morning, I met SEC agent Dana at a tucked-away breakfast spot in an old stone building by the river, where at 7:30 a.m., there was only the sound of spoons tapping cups and the barista's shoes gliding over wood floors. Dana arrived in a dark trench coat, movements crisp, gaze direct. What do you have for me? I placed the 3-terabyte hard drive on the table. Matte casing, white label. My handwriting blocky and clean like a balance sheet. Short positions, forged emails, roundabout transfers, server logs, metadata, voice memo of Grant's call, hash verified. Dana moved her espresso aside, slipped on thin gloves, opened her shock-proof bag, and received the drive like one might receive a transplant heart. I owed you one, Dana said, eyes never leaving the evidence. I didn't forget. She tapped the casing gently. The sound was dry and sharp. And this is a federal indictment waiting to happen. I handed over a thin envelope, printed metadata of Grant's emails from the private server, timestamps, IP addresses, device fingerprints. Dana skimmed it, the corner of her mouth twitching into a smile that never fully arrived. The key. We didn't shake hands, just a nod. I picked up the still warm cup, the scent of citrus clinging to my fingertips from the latte's peel. As I stood, the morning light swept across the table, catching the master evidence label before it disappeared into the black shot case. Dana spoke softly, as if to the air. Enough for federal prosecution. Outside, the sky was so blue, it felt like Connecticut had never known greed. I stood by the river for a long while, the water lapping gently against the rocks. In my mind, every piece fell into place. Robert in the guest house, Sienna at the Bloomberg terminal, Ava planting flags in Liechtenstein, Laura counting the clock. One image settled in me, the wooden table, the 3-terabyte drive, white label, the words master evidence. So still I could hear justice turning the page. Then I turned and walked away, knowing the wire was set, and all that was left was to pull. Everything was programmed like a chess match. Robert would, accidentally, drop a hint of suspicion into the company's internal chat group. Not enough to be considered an accusation, but just enough to trigger Grant Pierce's ego. On Thursday, Robert sent the message. We should double-check the internal trade logs. There are some discrepancies with the server data. 13 minutes later, Grant responded, his tone sharp as steel. Emergency meeting, 9 a.m. tomorrow. Mandatory attendance. Sienna Voss, you too. Robert replied with a nod emoji and shut his laptop. He looked at me, sweat starting to bead on his forehead. Are you sure? I just said quietly, don't overact. The truth will speak for itself. Friday morning. The air inside Westbrook Advisors headquarters was thick, like a storm holding its breath. The 27th floor conference room had its blinds shut, sunlight filtering through the gaps and casting slashes of light across the company logo. Like knife wounds, Grant sat at the head of the table, gray suit, deep blue tie, face expressionless, his right hand pressed on a stack of documents like he was holding down chaos. Robert walked in with a calm that was too practiced, and Sienna sat in the corner, gripping her pen so tight her knuckles were white. Thank you all for coming on short notice, Grant began, his voice straining for control, but the confidence in him was already cracked. There are signs of an internal leak regarding the Westbrook deal, and it seems... He paused, glancing at Robert. The source is our acting CFO, Mr. Hart. Robert stood, face steady. Would you care to clarify? Grant threw the folder onto the table. This email. You sent it to Sienna Voss. Instructions for trading before market open. Do you deny it? Robert took a deep breath, looked directly at him. If you trust that evidence, open the metadata. A beat of silence, tight as a pulled wire. Grant pressed his lips together and motioned for the tech staff to pull it up on the screen. The email appeared with sent from Robert Hart, Westbrook Advisors, sitting too perfectly in the corner. It looked manufactured. Robert folded his arms, voice eerily calm. Click File Properties. The room went dead silent. The cursor moved slowly, clicked Properties, then Details. A single line appeared, black text on white, cold and final. Created by G. Grant, Personal, 02:14 a.m., Thursday. No one said a word. Just Grant's shaky breathing, followed by the soft clatter of a pen dropping to the floor. Sienna lifted her head, her voice hoarse. I've already told the SEC everything, and now they want to talk to you. At that exact moment, the door burst open. 2 agents entered. Black suits, gold badges glinting under the lights. Grant Pierce, the lead agent announced, voice low and firm. You're under arrest for manipulation of securities and obstruction of justice. The first camera flash went off, followed by a dozen more flickering from the hallway, where reporters had been waiting. Grant backed away, choking. "You have no evidence!" One agent lifted a flash drive. "We have everything." Robert stared at the scene, eyes glazed, then turned toward me, standing just outside the room, arms crossed, my smile no longer about revenge, but proof. I said nothing. Sienna rose from her seat, let her pen drop to the table. A soft, sharp sound like the end of a song. As they led Grant past us, he turned, lost, and asked, "Who did this?" I answered quietly, just loud enough for him to hear. "The truth." When the door closed behind him, the room fell completely silent. Only the projector shut down, its light fading, leaving behind the faint smell of ozone and fear in the air. Robert sat down, buried his face in his hands. I walked over, placed a hand on his shoulder. "Now you understand the cost of transparency." He nodded slightly, not daring to look up. Sienna walked out first, tossed her ID badge on the table, her voice rough. "I'm done." She glanced briefly at Robert, then hurried off. Maybe she'd used him, but before I exposed him, he'd had real feelings for her. Laura waited in the hallway, the morning light catching her silver hair like a halo. She looked at me, said nothing, then lifted her vintage watch and whispered, "Perfect." I smiled. A 4-week plan, 7 people, 3 terabytes of data, closed in 27 minutes. As I stepped out of the building, the wind carried the smell of coffee from the shop down the street, and I knew this wasn't just a win, it was a reminder. In every power game, sometimes all you need is to let the powerful destroy themselves with the evidence they created. Noon at the Zurich spa, steam blurred the glass, and the scent of bergamot orange oil drifted in the air. I sat beside Laura on white upholstered lounge chairs, each of us holding a mimosa, the orange fizz kissing the rim of the glass like a sigh. The manager brought us warm towels. On the table sat my phone, its screen lighting up with a flurry of notifications. I tapped to open them, a red ticker bar scrolling across. SEC and FBI executed warrants at Westbrook Advisors. Managing partner, Grant Pierce, in custody. Across from us, Grant's wife was still waiting for her top-coat nail polish to be applied, her diamond-ringed hand resting on a towel. I looked up, my voice calm, as if reading a weather report. "Your husband was just arrested for market manipulation." A beat of silence. She slowly pulled her hand back, looked out through the misted glass, then nodded like someone who had already expected it. "Our assets are clean. I suppose it's his girlfriends who are panicking now." Laura tilted her glass, a glint of humor in her eyes. "You really know how to pick your moment." Her phone buzzed again. "Wexford Tech cancels IPO," she said. Another update. WBT rebounds plus 42% in session. I exhaled, letting my back sink into the chair. The third notification came in like a gentle closing strike. Robert Hart cleared, retained CFO role. I didn't smile. I simply swirled the mimosa slightly, watching the ring of bubbles dissolve into a perfect circle. 8 months later, my office in Zurich opens to a balcony facing the lake, its surface a giant sheet of glass in deep green blue. On the desk, a Mont Blanc pen, a leather-bound notebook, and the latest AUM report. 1.2 billion US dollars. I signed 2 more high-net-worth contracts, the numbers flowing smoothly under the nabe. My daughter had grown used to our new home, every morning running downstairs in her navy blazer like an arrow carrying laughter. Robert now consults remotely. The monthly transfers arrive on schedule, labeled simply, Family Trust, Child Support. He doesn't call often. Sometimes he asks about our daughter. I send him photos of her. Nothing more. Not a word too much. Laura walked in, her sand-colored wool coat still on, setting a hair clip onto the cover of the board. Minutes. "Board meeting will be quick. Just keep your pace as always. Understated, airtight." I nodded. A single image could capture everything about today. The pale wood table, Lake Zurich framed in the background, and the document titled Board Resolution, Kingsley, non-executive director. I picked up the pen and signed. A soft, clear click. The sound of a new order locking into place. Robert Hart. The name popped up on my screen, and I froze mid-keystroke. It had been 8 months since the divorce proceedings wrapped up, everything resolved as cleanly as a financial transaction. Clear, legal, leaving no echoes. But sometimes, the silence between two people who once built an entire empire together is louder than any word. I answered, my voice steady, as always. Hello, Robert. I assume this isn't about child support, since this month's transfer came right on time. On the other end, his breath carried a hint of hesitation, followed by the words I had predicted exactly. The board just appointed me COO of the European Division. And I need your advice. I let out a soft chuckle. A business offer from the man who unraveled my life. How fascinating! Robert paused for a few seconds, then spoke slowly. It's not out of sentiment, it's because no one understands the market. And people, like you do. I gently swirled my coffee cup, watching the thin steam rise into the crisp Zurich afternoon, then send over the proposal. But remember, Robert, strictly contract, strictly work. On the other end, he gave a short laugh, a sound tinged with gratitude and quiet regret. Understood. Thank you, Evelyn. I ended the call and looked out through the glass. The lake reflected strips of late afternoon light. Still, deep, no longer rippling, months later, my sister launched her blockchain finance studio, a space flooded with sunlight, its walls covered in price movement charts rendered like abstract art. That evening, we had dinner out on the terrace. Isabel shrugged with a giggle. Daddy only cuddles contracts now, not any lady. Laughter bubbled up, light and round like bubbles rising to the lake's surface. I looked at my daughter, then at Laura, reaching to serve her more salad, and suddenly realized that peace has its own sound. Not loud, not flashy, just the warmth of people who stay because they truly want to. The last light of day melted into the surface of Lake Zurich. A breeze gently stirred the curtains, tilting the mimosa on the table, its glass catching a sliver of sunlight. Soft as a breath, I sat still, needing neither escape nor validation, and simply smiled. Because in the end, freedom isn't leaving someone. It's returning to yourself, once you finally understand the worth of what was lost and what remains.